preparing to go live. Oh, and we're live.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jeff Hammond. I'm a senior editor with Janover Ventures, and this is our first pilot episode of our as yet named podcast. Today, we are going to be talking a little bit about what's going on in the world. So looking at the Ukraine and Russia crisis and how this relates to commercial real estate in the US. So first, let's look at the conflict currently going on. We've got, ever since Russia has invaded Ukraine, there's been a massive amount of effects felt worldwide, not just in the region. The UN estimates that as of today, 2.5 million people have left Ukraine, and there's another 1.5 million easily internally displaced. And economically, this is also having huge impacts. First of all, in Ukraine itself, more than $100 billion worth of infrastructure, real estate, and other assets have been destroyed in the conflict. And of course, with sanctions against Russia, Russian banks owe Western banks approximately $120 billion. And it's unsure if this will ever get paid. But the big issue right now that is hitting consumers across the country and across the world is elevated oil prices. Now, oil prices have come down from $130 a barrel that happened late last week, but they're still significantly higher than last month. And so this could have significant impacts, along with many other things, on American real estate. And so with us today, I'd first like to introduce Blake Janover, our founder and CEO, and ask if you could give us some insights on how could everything that's going on right now, how could this impact us in America in the CRE world?
Yeah, thanks for the intro, Jeff. So as whoever's watching, right, this is going to a pretty large audience knows or doesn't know. I had some echo in the beginning, but this is a pilot, right? So we're experimenting to see what it's like if a handful of us in our office or from across the world really get on a Zoom together, share it publicly, and talk about what's going on in commercial real estate finance this week, capital markets, and introduce some of our personalities into this. So Jeff is formerly a commercial property executive in Multi-Housing News. Now he's a senior editor here. We're very grateful to have him. Joe Nolan is the man with the Pilot headphones. He's our SBA 7A, SBA 504 expert, and also one of the most curious and intelligent people I know. I'm very intellectually attracted to Mr. Joe Nolan. We have Brian Rippey. I'm physically attracted to Brian. We've got another person joining the podcast back there. So Brian joined us recently from Walker and Dunlop CBRE. He's working directly with Brad Beatty on our kind of middle market and larger transaction volumes. So we're looking primarily at multifamily and general commercial property loans north of $5 million, construction north of $10 million. Brad Beatty is the man in that wears sweatshirts in Florida. He's comes out of recently Banyan Capital. Prior to that, Meridian Capital, 10 years of experience in middle market capital markets. And we've got Steve Schwartz, who doesn't do anything in commercial real estate finance, but he does run our marketing department, and he's in charge of this. So he's kind of the boss here today. Okay, so that was 25 minutes of intros. Jeff, if I'm going to be honest with you, I missed some of the stats that you shared because I was just generally nervous about speaking. But the question you posed, if I recall correctly, is kind of what's my take on the effects of the conflict, the tragic conflict in Ukraine or between Ukraine and Russia on local commercial real estate in the United States. Did I catch that right?
Exactly. Yep.
You know, I was reading a book recently, and he was talking about that there's I'm going to describe it wrong, but there's like chaotic systems like weather, where it's really hard to predict, right? Like what weather is going to do. And then there's like a second order of chaotic systems, which is like markets, where you could predict what a market's going to do, but then that prediction influences the behavior of the masses. And so it's impossible to kind of accurately predict what an outcome is, especially when there's so many interdependencies among across supply chain, currencies, and interest rate markets. So what I'll say is, and then I'll stop talking, is there's two sides to it, right? So on one side, when there's a conflict like this, fear increases, and the consequence of that is there's a flight to safety. So you'll see commodities or gold go up in value, and more specifically, you'll see a flight to 10-year treasuries and US treasuries, where those will go up in value and yields will go down. And what happens when yields go down is that interest rates go down and mortgages become cheaper and cap rates compress, and commercial real estate is also a place that people consider safe. So they move money out of public equities or out of cash into commercial real estate as an inflation hedge and protection and whatnot. So that'll buoy property values. Of course, the other side of that equation is is inflation's run rampant. Whether or not anybody wants to call it transient or not is their prerogative, but it is what it is. Will expense inflation grow more rapidly than income inflation on a property's P&L? I don't know. Does supply chain interruption materially increase the costs to build, which makes affordable housing more and more difficult to create? Yeah, it seems like it. So my answer is it's a double-edged sword, and it's really hard to predict with so many interdependencies. Anybody else want to add anything to that?
I think it really hit like a lot of the high level topics, especially with the conflict. We're going to see a reshuffling of the world order. That's Ray Dalio's been a great follow in terms of looking at things from a big picture, but you figure with Russia being essentially the biggest petro state in Europe, primarily supplying Germany and England with the heating for the winter, there's going to be carry-on effects because we are in a global market. So you see things where transportation costs are going to go up with the price of oil. You're going to see a real competition for material that has already gone up. And I think you really hit the nail on the head with the inflation. Last month we were at 7.9%, according to the statistics that came out yesterday. And if you think about what's happened so far in March with gas prices up through the roof, none of that was captured in that reading of the statistics. So when you're looking at where you can really place your next dollar, something that's a natural interest rate hedge like commercial real estate or apartments that are really able to keep up with that inflation, could become a much more attractive asset class. I'm not sure how much more attractive it could possibly be when you have markets appreciating 20% last year and on pace to pass that this year. But with a decrease in what's perceived as safe assets and just an overall real likely contraction of the global economy, it's going to be interesting to see how these flows of capital worldwide are going to affect, local markets. Because, at the end of the day, real estate's still local, but we've seen it over the last couple of years during the pandemic, a lot of institutional players making large plays, and this could really accelerate that trend.
There's a few things you brought up. I just want to double click on a couple of them. First off, you mentioned that CPI doesn't contemplate, and you mentioned some things, and I think there's a really long conversation we had not on here about why CPI is a bit of a joke of a KPI. I would say that hopefully this conflict is temporary, right? Super temporary, although it's a big unknown. If it is temporary, Joe, that contraction you're talking about, the economic contraction, would be kind of accelerated by central banks increasing interest rates across the board in order to curb inflation. So in the very short term, like commercial real estate remains like super attractive. Now I've made bearish calls on interest rates and markets like it, so I've been wrong for a long time. But if the Fed moves as aggressively as it seems they may to increase interest rates, that's going to have an adverse effect on cap rates and financing instruments. And the other thing that I picked up on that you said is that transportation costs go up. And it's interesting because transportation costs go up. So everybody's moved away from big cities, from dense populations into suburban, right? But if transportation costs go up, that brings people back into big cities where there's good public transit. So it'll be interesting to see how these dynamics kind of play out in the long term, as we see like apartment buildings in Boca trading at like pro forma 3 caps, but like it's crazy when you look in a historical context, but when you look at what the alternatives are today, it's like it makes sense, and it's not crazy at all.
You can tell also there's people that we've been working with, Brad and I specifically, that are just recognizing that the future is very uncertain right now. So we've been seeing a major increase in deal flow within the past month, really. Just think, people are worried about the future, which is very understandable. And so commercial real estate is still pretty attractive. And we're definitely seeing like maybe 4 or 5 times as many deals as we normally would, which is pretty nuts.
Which is nuts because I think we're taking up to $1 billion a week in applications through all of our sites right now. So really drinking out of the proverbial fire
hose. For sure.
It's definitely interesting. As rates are creeping up and as people kind of see that that's going to be coming in the immediate future, people really start to jump on it. So when rates are just kind of steady for a long period of time, nobody has any urgency. When people see that it might be kind of the end of that low rate environment, they start to really try to lock into some long-term fixed rate debt. I was going to touch on something and I realized I was muted, but like just within a mile of our property where we work out of here in Boca, there's probably about at least 1,000 brand new units of multifamily. Boca's just had incredible rent growth. I think people who have had renewals have been hit with like a $500, it seems to be the norm increase. I would say with like, the level of inflation, transportation costs, at some point there's going to be, some pinch as to like how much can these landlords raise rents. And in most cases, if you're buying at a 3 cap, you have to raise rent significantly to really make your yield on a deal. So I think at some level that, inflation is going to compete with really the kind of the pie being, how much can a consumer actually pay on their rent and still make, all their other payments and, provide food for their family. So, Ukraine is definitely driving the energy part, but it's, just to kind of circle back on the inflation and how that relates to maybe multifamily investments and that kind of thing. Definitely thought it was worth mentioning.
Those are some interesting points. So to comment on a couple, first off, I think Boca Raton is a unique market. I think it has very unique supply demand dynamics. There's this very unique relationship between Boca Raton and New York. Although there's obviously a lot of small markets, secondary markets across the country that benefited from like this migration of work from office to work from home, and really the pandemic that locked people inside buildings. About the 3% cap rate, you know what? If you're an institutional buyer and you're buying a 3% cap rate, yeah, you want to increase rents or you want to have this value add story, but also in a lot of ways, and I can't believe I'm saying this because I'm the biggest critic of 3% cap rates, but in a lot of ways, it's a good deal when you compare it to what the alternatives are. can anybody tell me where 10-year treasuries are today, 10-year treasury yields?
2%, just
So you get a
above
2
2%.
You get a 2% 10-year treasury from a government that's like shooting money out of a cannon, which also, by the way, reflects a negative 6% real return, which is bonkers. Yeah, so nobody appreciates that, right? So and by the way, when an institutional buyer is buying a 3 cap, what they're really buying is a negative 4% or 4.5% real return, which is interesting. But it's better than treasuries, right? And if you believe that rents can continue to grow and essentially will continue to grow in perpetuity, the clip at which they grow is in question, but rents will continue to grow as dollars become incrementally less valuable as derivative of inflation. So like rents will continue to go up, right? As long as dollars are worth less and less and less, rents will go up. So the hope is like, hey, look, some of my expenses are somewhat fixed, right? Like my taxes, they're not fixed, but like, can I get rents to increase at a greater clip than my expenses do because of inflation? So there's like an arbitrage opportunity there. And the last thing that's so interesting, everybody says like, oh, rates go up, so financing slows down. But Brad, your experience is rates go up and people have FOMO, and now there's urgency. And I never thought about it like that. Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
I think it's going to be really interesting over the next couple of years to see how these central bankers play out with this tension. I mean, coming into the year, we were expecting at least 3 interest rate hikes to try to put a little bit of a brake on the economy that's growing quickly and try to break inflation. But now you have this real pressure that's coming in through consumer spending on gasoline. And you have people in the House and Senate talking about sending people checks as a gasoline refund. So, there's all of a sudden, with this uncertainty, it seems like a lot of banks and a lot of governments are going to default to, subsidize and expand spending, which is going to be directly in conflict with what the smart bank said that we had to be doing coming into this year. So that, real tension between trying to grow in uncertain times and trying to grow sustainably at all times is going to be tough to sort of parse out over the next given time frame.
I don't want to get too macro here, right? Because I'm not an economist. I'll speak for all of us and say we're just a bunch of knuckleheads. There's smarter people than us to talk on this, but this whole cycle of central bank regimes debasing currency, and like Joe, what you talked about, there's this political tension there as well, right? Like, I'm the president. I mean, I want people to be happy, and they don't realize, generally speaking, that the inflation tax is significantly heavier than an actual income tax. Also, early in this conversation, we talked about Ukraine and Russia. So I just want to say very clearly, my wife is Russian, born and raised in Moscow. She's actually half Russian, half Ukrainian. My daughter is consequently Russian. When you go far enough back in my genealogy, I'm 100% Russian, and we're 100% with Ukraine, 1,000% with Ukraine. And something that sucks is that we have family in Russia, and family in Russia doesn't actually know what's going on. So, the Russian people in whole aren't to blame here. The state-owned media is sharing a very one-sided, dishonest narrative. And I know I've gone off topic because I'm supposed to talk about commercial real estate finance, but I do want to say, I love my Russian family, and I'm with Ukraine, and we've got employees in Ukraine that we love dearly, and it's been a mess.
Thanks for that, Blake. At this point, since we do want to keep this show to about 30 minutes each episode, I'd like to kind of shift gears a bit. And I just kind of want to know what you guys are working on right now. What deals are kind of standing out? What's unique? What are you noticing in the people you're talking to, the lenders, the borrowers? Just tell me what's going on. Brad, can we start with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely, I focus on, as Blake had mentioned, I'm more on the structured finance. So I do bridge financing, construction. We have an agency department. I cover everything that's basically fixed rate, but not agency. Working on a few interesting deals. Actually have one in process right now in Gainesville, Florida. It's unique in that it's a student housing property, but it's actually a fractured condo. So they are buying roughly around 86% of the units of this whole complex. We were able to get them a bank loan, actually at 70% loan to cost, non-recourse, 7-year term, 3.25%, 2 years interest only with some renovation funding. And they also have a line for buying future units as they become available. One of the sickest deals I've gotten for a client early in my career, just to have a non-recourse bank deal, pretty high leverage. Maybe, they could have gone a little higher if they wanted to, but that was kind of their ask, and we got them exactly what they wanted.
So first off, for anybody that's listening, like, we're not encouraging you to send us student housing fractured condos in tertiary markets, right? Like,
thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, we want to do your large construction loans, and we want to do your CMBS deals and your agency stuff and things like that. So yes, like, we can do what's the loan amount there, Brad? Was it
23.8?
We'll take your 23.8 fractured condo student housing, co-living deal / non-flagged hotel, but from time to time. All right. I just wanted to mention that. You have another deal. Brad, I know you did another interesting, weird deal. So
we're talking about unique. We're talking about unique deals here.
Right. Nobody cares about the 65% LTV 1030 CMBS deal that we did for the Chipotle. How did that Chipotle deal price, by the way?
It was roughly 4.25 on a 10-year. It was a smaller CMBS deal. They wanted to have interest only on the deal, so we got them 5 years interest only, rated for roughly 4.25. It was a strip center in Dubuque, Iowa. Dubuque.
Yeah, it's a great, very active in Dubuque. Mm-hmm. Are there Chipotle discounts? Do we?
Yeah, I've been fighting with the local Chipotle down here about that for the last couple months.
If we could get extra hot sauce, like, with our orders, that'd be ideal. The Cholula. Brad, I would say let's not bring up your other deal because we've only got like 6 minutes left. So let's give something to Joe Nolan, and we'll skip Rippy because whatever. And
I'm just here for the fun.
You're here.
I'm here to have a good time.
You're like the peanut gallery. That's before your time, but
okay. Yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of interesting deals happening with the small and medium-sized businesses. What I'm seeing a lot of right now is people looking to add some certainty to their life, try to turn something like rent that's been going up, or their mortgage that might be on a variable rate, and try to flip it into a fixed rate, or just try to have a little bit more control over their assets. So, a great deal I just did was for a chiropractor down in South Florida, looking to buy a new building and fit it out. So they are doing the purchase for about $650. We are adding about $200,000 for TIs, because right now it's just a cold dark shell. about 50,000 for closing costs, FF&E. So total loan, we got approval for about $917,000. The borrower is putting in a $10,000 check, and because it's 7A, we are actually doing 25,000 on working capital on top of it. So they'll get a $15,000 check back at the closing table. That's going to be fixed rate for 25 years. There's 5 resets. So every 5 years, we'll get a new fixed rate period. And that's Wall Street Journal Prime plus 1.5%. So today that's like 4.75. Just unbelievable to get up to like 150% LTV with the bank looking for $10,000 down. But if you're a professional, if you licensed CPA, attorney, any kind of practice, lenders are out there right now really looking to fill up their balance sheets with like these really just resistant loans from. It doesn't matter if it's good times or bad times. People get sick. People need their accountant. People need to go talk to their lawyer. So those are the easiest deals to place right now. But, I'm seeing a ton of people trying to get creative as well with like hospitality properties. I think me and Brad have seen a lot of people asking to convert hotels into micro apartments. So there's a lot of that happening out in the market. But whenever I'm talking to lenders, I do feel a bit of hesitancy in terms of lenders just having a little bit of uncertainty about interest rates and about their appetite. So I think this is really a great time to take a look at getting those fixed rates in place before, who knows where we're gonna be in 18 months.
I think it's such an interesting dynamic, right? Like I would say that, and thank you for sharing that, Joe, 100% LTV or 150% of the purchase price, 99% of cost. There's ALF and self-storage deals getting done with CMBS or debt funds that are eligible for SBA 7A for embarrassingly stupid leverage. And the other side of that coin is that there's SBA deals being done on 51% owner occupied properties that are 25-year ammos that could be done on 30s with 10 years of IO. So there's a lot out there, and that actually, so we've only got a few minutes left, so I'll try to make this quick. But if any of you guys, what would you say is the most expensive part of a commercial mortgage, like the most expensive item in a loan from your perspective, your experience?
Do you mean like on the HUD in terms of like what's the most expensive part of the process?
Doesn't have to be on the HUD, but yeah, it could be the HUD. Is it lender legal? Is it appraisal? Is it interest rate? Like,
if it's CMBS, it's lender legal.
yeah, right. CMBS, it's lender legal. Anybody want to add anything else to there?
Appraisal costs have been out of control lately, but I don't know if that's the most expensive.
Smaller deals, an appraisal can be a pretty big chunk.
Yeah, as a percentage of the deal,
sure.
Totally. Yeah.
And I'm also seeing appraisals are taking forever right now. I mean, things that were being quoted like 2 to 4 weeks are 4 to 6 weeks, and they're saying don't even bother asking. We can't expedite it.
Can we like insert a Sandlot GIF with the forever? I don't know if
yeah. Oh, you're good at that, Joe.
So I'll say that the biggest cost that a borrower incurs, and this plays into the conversation between Brad and Joe. Well, it wasn't between them, just Brad was talking about his deal, Joe was talking about his. And I think the biggest cost that a borrower generally incurs is that when they sign an application or an LOI and choose a deal, because and that cost is opportunity cost. So there's 20,000 banks and credit unions out there. I don't know what the number is exactly. So I'm going to say 20,000 banks and credit unions and other lenders. And many of them have different products. They have hundreds of thousands of loan originators. You could have 2 loan originators sitting next to each other at Wells Fargo. One of them could only be working on institutional $100 million plus industrial property deals. And one of them could be only working on SBA 7A deals under 2 million, and they could both have no idea what the other guy does, whatever, they're siloed. But this is all kind of lending institutions. And I know I'm on the 30-minute mark, so I'll say there's like a Rubik's Cube of possible outcomes, right? There's a million possible outcomes when you contemplate things on the execution side, costs, leverage, constraints like debt yield, debt service coverage ratio, general leverage constraints, terms, interest only options, resets, amortizations, how good they are at managing construction draws. There's so many things to contemplate. And if you're just talking to one bank or a broker that's got like a few buddies at a bank, your biggest cost is when you sign. So I'll end it at that. And I'll say, and then Jeff, you might have some formal closing statements, but I'll say we're piloting this. I don't know if this is something we're going to do every week or ever again or at all. So for anybody that's listening, send me an email, blake@janover.ventures. I may not respond, but you can send it to me. And maybe we'll put a survey in here. But what should we talk about? Did you like this 1 to 10? Is this useful? Should it have a name? Should we interview people? Who should we interview? Just tell us what to do. We don't know what the hell we're doing. Like the
Or
only
leave a
thing we're good
comment.
at- Oh, yes, in the comments. Right. The only thing we know how to do is like build cool technology that like makes financing commercial properties better and easier. And then like nothing else. Ask my wife. She'll tell you. Does anybody have any closing statements they want to throw out here? We're a minute over. People want to get their lives back. Brian, you want to add some value?
This was great. Let's do it again next week.
Oh, great job, Brian Rippey.
Can I just say something to say something? Because I haven't said anything the entire time. So I just
I
want to use my voice. You know what I mean?
Where would we be without you and Brian on
Steve,
today's
we
show?
appreciate you.
For sure. And Blake, did you use that Rubik's Cube example because Rippy's like a Rubik's Cube master?
We should do, okay. Next episode.
It's time. Gotta go. See you
guys
later.
All right, we're turning it off, everybody. Thank